The transport shuttle landed on Station Varus with a soft hum. The doors opened and bright white light flooded inside. 24 young cadets from 12 different star systems stepped out onto the metal platform. They were all here for the same reason. They wanted to join the Galactic Military Academy, the most famous military school in the known universe. Do-hyun Park was the last one to step off the shuttle. He was not tall. He was not impressive to look at. He stood at about average height for a human male, with black hair cut short and dark brown eyes that watched everything carefully. He wore the simple gray uniform given to all new cadets. Nothing about him stood out. This was exactly what he wanted. The other cadets around him were far more impressive. The Palaxians were tall and beautiful, standing almost 3 meters high with scales that changed colors in the light. The Korath were massive creatures with forearms and muscles that bulged under their skin like rocks. The Veth were made of living crystal, their bodies shining like diamonds under the station lights. And there were others too. Insectoid species with many legs. Aquatic species in special water-filled suits. Gas-based lifeforms floating in containment spheres. Do-hyun looked at all of them and felt no fear. He simply observed and remembered. A loud voice echoed across the landing platform. "Attention, new cadets. Form a line. Move quickly." The speaker was Instructor Ven, a veteran soldier covered in old battle scars. He belonged to a reptilian species with green scales and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. He walked down the line of cadets, looking at each one with obvious judgment. When he reached the Korath cadet named Yurix, he stopped. Yurix was huge, even for his species. His forearms were thick with muscle, and his chest was as wide as a door. "Korath," Instructor Ven said with a nod. "Your kind are known for strength. We expect great things from you." Yurix puffed out his chest with pride. "I will not disappoint, Instructor." Ven moved on to a Palaxian female named Scylla. Her scales shimmered pink and gold as she stood at attention. "Palaxian. Your species excels at speed and agility. The obstacle courses will favor you." Scylla bowed her long neck gracefully. "Thank you, Instructor." Then Ven reached a Veth named Brenix. The crystal being stood perfectly still, light refracting through his transparent body. Veth, nearly indestructible. "Combat training will test even you." Brenix made a sound like glass chimes. "I am prepared." Finally, Instructor Ven stopped in front of Do-hyun. The reptilian instructor looked down at his datapad, then back at the human. His yellow eyes showed confusion, then dismissal. "Human," he said, and the word sounded like an insult. "First of your kind to attend this academy. Your species achieved faster than light travel only 18 years ago. You are new." Do-hyun bowed politely, a gesture from his home country on Earth. "Yes, Instructor. I am honored to be here." Ven made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Moral gravity, 1.0 standard. Oxygen atmosphere. Short lifespan. Limited physical abilities." He looked up from the datapad. "Tell me, human, why are you here? What do you hope to achieve?" Every other cadet was watching now. Do-hyun could feel their eyes on him. The Korath Yurix was smiling in a way that was not friendly. Some of the other cadets whispered to each other in languages Do-hyun did not understand. But Do-hyun just smiled softly. "I wish to serve, Instructor, and to learn." Ven stared at him for a long moment. Then he snorted and moved on. "We shall see if you survive the first week." The cadets were led to their dormitory building. It was a massive structure with hundreds of rooms, each designed to accommodate different species. Do-hyun was assigned to a standard room with artificial gravity set to 0.6, which the Academy considered comfortable for most organic life forms. His roommate was already there when he arrived. Torin was a young Palaxian male, his scales a nervous shade of blue. He was tall and thin, with large eyes that blinked too often. "Oh, you must be the human," Torin said, his voice high and excited. "I have read about your species. You come from a planet called Earth, yes? In the outer spiral arm?" Do-hyun set down his small bag of belongings. "Yes, that is correct." "Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating." Torin moved closer, studying Do-hyun like he was an interesting insect. "You have only 2 arms, and your skin is so soft. How do you protect yourself from predators?" "We run," Do-hyun said simply. "Oh, we fight? With what?" "You have no claws, no scales, no natural weapons." Do-hyun held up his hands. "We have these, and we make tools." Torin's scales flickered with confusion. "Tools? You mean like machines?" "Yes, weapons, vehicles, buildings, anything we need." Do-hyun sat on his assigned bed, testing its softness. It was too soft for his taste, but he would adapt. "We are not strong like the Korath. We are not fast like the Palaxians. We are not tough like the Veth, but we survive." "How?" Torin asked, genuinely curious. Do-hyun thought about the question. He thought about Earth. He thought about the millions of years of evolution that had shaped his species. He thought about the ice ages and the droughts and the predators and the diseases and the wars. He thought about all the ways his planet had tried to kill humanity and how humanity had refused to die. "We do not give up," he said finally. "Ever." Torin did not seem to understand, but he nodded anyway and went back to unpacking his own belongings. That night, Do-hyun lay awake in his bed. The artificial gravity felt strange to him. It was too light. On Earth, gravity pulled at you constantly, pressing down on your bones and muscles every second of every day. Here, he felt like he might float away. He got up quietly, making sure not to wake Torin. He walked to the small gym attached to the dormitory. At this late hour, it was empty. He found the gravity controls and turned them up. 0.8 standard, then 1.0, then 1.2, then 1.5. At 1.5 standard gravity, most cadets at the academy would struggle to stand. Their bones would creak. Their muscles would burn. Their hearts would work overtime just to pump blood through their bodies. Do-hyun began doing push-ups, then sit-ups, then squats. He moved smoothly and easily, his body comfortable in the crushing gravity. After an hour, he switched to running on the track. His feet pounded against the floor, each step carrying 3 times the weight it would in the normal academy environment. He was not even breathing hard. When he finished, he turned the gravity back to 0.6 and returned to his room. Torin was still asleep, his scales now a peaceful shade of green. Do-hyun lay back down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, real training would begin. He would meet his instructors and his fellow cadets. He would be tested and judged, and probably underestimated. That was fine. He was used to being underestimated. On Earth, humans had spent thousands of years underestimating each other. They had fought wars and built empires and destroyed civilizations. They had split the atom and walked on the moon and eventually reached the stars. And through all of it, they have learned one important lesson. The ones who survived were not always the strongest or the fastest or the toughest. Sometimes, the ones who survived were simply the ones who refused to quit. Do-hyun closed his eyes and smiled. Let them underestimate him. Let them think he was weak and primitive and useless. When the time came, he would show them what a human could do. Training at the Galactic Military Academy was brutal. Every day began before sunrise and ended long after dark. The cadets were pushed to their limits in every way possible. They ran, they fought, they studied, they were broken down and built back up again. And through all of it, Do-yoon Park stayed in the middle. He was never the best at anything. He was never the worst. He ran fast enough to avoid attention, but slow enough to avoid praise. He lifted enough weight to pass the tests, but never enough to impress anyone. He answered questions in class correctly, but never raised his hand first. He became invisible, and that was exactly what he wanted. The first week focused on physical conditioning. Every morning, the cadets would gather in the main training field for exercises. Instructor Ven would stand at the front, barking orders while his assistants watched for anyone who fell behind. 20 laps around the field. Standard gravity. Move. The field was massive, almost 2 kilometers around. 20 laps meant 40 kilometers of running. For most species, this was a serious challenge. The Palaxians used their long legs to take the lead, their bodies designed for exactly this kind of endurance. The Korath struggled more, their heavy muscles burning energy quickly. The Veth moved at a steady pace, their crystal bodies efficient but not fast. Do-hyun ran in the middle of the pack. He kept his breathing, even in his pace, steady. Around him, cadets began to tire. A Korath named Grox fell to his knees at lap 15, his forearms trembling with exhaustion. 2 Palaxians collapsed at lap 18, their scales turning an unhealthy gray color. By the end of the 20 laps, only half the cadets had finished. Do-hyun crossed the finish line in the middle of the remaining group. He was sweating lightly, but his heart rate was barely elevated. Instructor Ven walked past him without a second glance. Acceptable human. Keep up. The afternoon brought strength training. The cadets were taken to a massive gym filled with equipment designed for dozens of different species. Weights ranged from a few kilograms to several tons. Machines could test every muscle group in every kind of body. Urix the Korath dominated these sessions. His forearms allowed him to lift weights that made the ground shake. He would roar with effort as he pressed massive blocks of metal above his head, then dropped them with a crash that echoed through the entire gym. 400 kilograms. He shouted after one particularly impressive lift. Who can match the Korath? The other cadets watched with awe. Even Instructor Ven nodded with approval. Excellent, Cadet Urix. Your species' reputation is well earned. Urix flexed all 4 of his arms and looked around the gym. His eyes landed on Do-hyun, who was quietly lifting a much smaller weight in the corner. Human, Urix called out. What is your species' maximum lift? 50 kilograms? 100? Some of the other cadets laughed. Do-hyun did not react. He simply continued his exercise, moving the weight up and down with perfect form. Urix walked over to him, his massive shadow blocking the light. I asked you a question, small one. Do-hyun set down his weight and looked up at the Korath. Urix was more than twice his size, with muscles that could crush bone like paper. But Do-hyun's expression did not change. The record for my species is around 500 kilograms, Do-hyun said calmly. But that was under Earth gravity. Here, in this lighter gravity, we might do more. Urix laughed, a deep booming sound. 500? I lifted 400 as a warm-up. And you say your record is only 500? Yes, Do-hyun said. Then humans are even weaker than I thought. Urix turned to the other cadets. Did you hear that? Their strongest can barely match my casual training. More laughter. Do-hyun simply picked up his weight and continued his exercise. But inside, he was thinking. 500 kilograms was the official record. It was what humans could lift in controlled conditions, under Earth's heavy gravity, with judges watching and rules to follow. It was not the limit of what humans could do. Do-hyun knew stories from Earth's history. Stories of mothers lifting cars off their trapped children. Stories of soldiers carrying wounded friends for miles through enemy territory. Stories of people surviving things that should have killed them, doing things that should have been impossible, simply because they refused to accept defeat. Humans were not limited by their muscles. They were limited by their minds. And when the mind decided that something had to be done, the body would follow. But the Korath did not need to know this. Not yet. The weeks continued. Combat training began in the second week. The cadets learned fighting techniques designed for different body types. They practiced with weapons and without. They sparred against each other and against training robots. Scylla the Palaxian excelled here. Her long limbs and flexible body made her almost impossible to hit. She would dance around her opponents, striking from unexpected angles, then slipping away before they could respond. Beautiful. Instructor Ven praised her after she defeated 3 cadets in a row. The Palaxian style is truly a work of art. When it was Do-Hyun's turn to fight, he was matched against a medium-sized cadet from a species he did not recognize. The alien had 6 limbs and could move in any direction quickly. It seemed like an impossible opponent. The fight lasted exactly 90 seconds. Do-Hyun dodged the first attack, blocked the second, and found an opening on the third. He struck once, precisely, hitting a nerve cluster that dropped his opponent to the ground. Victory, human cadet, the referee announced. Instructor Ven watched with mild surprise. Not bad, human. You have some skill. Do-Hyun bowed and returned to the line. He had won, but he had won simply. He had not shown his full speed or his full strength. He had not used any of the more advanced techniques he knew. He was saving those for later. In the evenings, Do-Hyun would return to the gym and train alone. He would increase the gravity to 1.5 or even 2.0 standard and push his body until his muscles screamed. Then he would rest, recover, and do it again. Torin noticed his late-night absences. "Where do you go every night?" The Palaxian asked one evening. "You leave after I fall asleep and return before I wake up." "Do humans not need rest?" "We need rest," Do-Hyun said. "But we need less than most species. 8 hours of sleep is normal for us. Some humans function well on 6 or even 4. 4 hours?" Torin's scales turned pale with shock. "I need 12 hours minimum. How do you function on so little?" Do-Hyun shrugged. "Our ancestors were prey animals. Sleeping too long meant being eaten. We evolved to rest quickly and wake easily." "Your planet sounds terrifying," Torin said quietly. "It is," Do-Hyun agreed. "But it made us strong." The third week brought the announcement that everyone had been waiting for. Commandant Terrell, the head of the entire academy, appeared on screens throughout the station. He was a massive insectoid creature with 6 eyes and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. "Cadets," his voice boomed through every speaker. "You have survived 3 weeks of basic training. Congratulations. But now, the real test begins." The screen showed an image of a massive arena. It was empty, but there were marks on the floor that suggested terrible trials had taken place there. The Crucible examination will occur at the end of this week. It is the most difficult test you will ever face. Many of you will fail. Some of you may be seriously injured. But those who pass will prove that they are worthy of serving in the galactic military. The screen went dark. In the dormitory, cadets immediately began talking in worried voices. The Crucible was legendary. Story said that it was calibrated to push each cadet to their absolute physical limit. Some cadets never recovered from it. Torin was shaking. "I have heard stories," he whispered. "Last year, a cadet died during the Crucible. His heart simply stopped." Do-Hyun listened to the fear around him. He understood it. The Crucible was designed to break people. It was supposed to find the edge of what your body could do, then push you past it. But Do-Hyun was not afraid. He had grown up on a planet that tried to kill humans every single day. He had trained his body in gravity that would crush most aliens. He had learned to push past pain and exhaustion and fear. The Crucible would test him, but he was ready to be tested. And when it was over, everyone would finally see what a human could really do. The day of the Crucible arrived with cold silence. No one spoke during breakfast. No one joked or laughed. Even Yurix the Korath, who was always boasting about his strength, sat quietly and ate his food without a word. Dahyun ate calmly. He had prepared for this day his entire life, even before he knew this test existed. Every morning run on Earth, every hour in the gym. Every time he had pushed his body past the point of pain and kept going. It had all been preparation for moments like this. The cadets assembled in the great arena at exactly 900 hours. The space was enormous, large enough to hold a small city. The floor was marked with lines and circles that divided it into different testing zones. Above them, thousands of seats were filled with spectators, senior officers, instructors, government officials. All of them had come to watch the new cadets break. Commandant Terrell stood on a raised platform at one end of the arena. His insectoid body was covered in ceremonial armor that gleamed under the lights. His 6 eyes moved slowly across the assembled cadets, studying each one. "Welcome to the Crucible," he said, his voice amplified to fill the entire arena. For 3,000 years, this test has separated the worthy from the unworthy. It has broken the weak and forged the strong. Today, you will learn which one you are. He raised one of his limbs and pointed to the testing zones. The Crucible consists of 15 stages. Each stage is designed to push you to the limit of your species' known capabilities. You will be tested on strength, speed, endurance, pain tolerance, and mental fortitude. The difficulty will increase with each stage until you reach your breaking point. A massive display screen activated behind him, showing statistics and charts. No cadet has completed all 15 stages in 60 years. The current record is 12 stages, held by a Korath warrior who later became one of our greatest generals. Most cadets fail between stages 6 and 10. This is normal. This is expected. There is no shame in reaching your limit. His eyes swept across the cadets again. But there is shame in giving up before you reach it. The Crucible does not accept surrender. You will continue until your body fails you. Medical teams are standing by to ensure your safety. But you will push until you cannot push anymore. He lowered his limb. Begin. The first 5 stages were designed to eliminate the weakest cadets quickly. Basic fitness tests: running, jumping, climbing, swimming through tanks of various liquids. Each stage had time limits and minimum requirements calibrated to each species. Dahyun moved through them efficiently. He did not try to be fast. He did not try to impress anyone. He simply completed each task and moved to the next one. Around him, cadets struggled and strained. Some failed immediately, their bodies not prepared for even the basic challenges. Torin the Palaxian was doing well. His long limbs carried him through the obstacle courses with ease. His scales had turned a confident shade of blue. He even smiled at Dahyun as they moved to stage 6. "Not so bad, yes?" Torin said. Maybe the stories about the Crucible were exaggerated. Dahyun did not smile back. The real test has not started yet. Stage 6 began the species-specific challenges. The testing zones separated, and each cadet was directed to equipment designed for their particular physiology. The Korath went to massive weight stations. The Palaxians went to complex agility courses. The Veth went to impact testing chambers. Dahyun was directed to a zone marked Human Test Subject 1. He was alone. No other humans had ever reached this stage of the Crucible. The equipment had been prepared based on theoretical data about human capabilities, but it had never actually been used. An automated voice spoke from hidden speakers. Stage 6. Endurance run. Distance, 50 kilometers. Gravity, 1.0 standard. Time limit, 4 hours. A treadmill activated beneath Do-Yin's feet. The gravity in his testing zone increased, pressing down on his shoulders like an old friend. 1.0 standard. Earth normal. Home. He began to run. Around the arena, spectators watched multiple screens showing different cadets. Most eyes were on Yurix, who was attempting to lift increasingly heavy weights. His forearms strained and his muscles bulged as he pushed himself harder and harder. The crowd cheered with each successful lift. No one was watching the human. Do-Yin ran. 1 kilometer. 5 kilometers. 10. His feet struck the treadmill in a steady rhythm. His breathing was controlled and even. His heart pumped efficiently, sending oxygen-rich blood to his muscles. On Earth, he had run marathons. 42 kilometers through heat and cold, rain and sun. He had run ultramarathons. 100 kilometers through mountains and deserts. He had trained his body to run and never stop running. 50 kilometers was nothing. He finished in 3 hours and 12 minutes, well under the time limit. He was sweating, but his legs were steady. His heart rate was elevated, but not dangerous. Stage 6 complete, the automated voice announced. Proceed to Stage 7. On the other side of the arena, Yurix completed his own Stage 6 challenge with a triumphant roar. He had lifted 600 kilograms, setting a new record for first-time cadets. The crowd cheered loudly. Instructor Ven made a note on his datapad. The Korath is impressive. What about the human? His assistant checked the screens. The human completed his endurance run. Time was acceptable. Nothing remarkable. Ven nodded and returned his attention to the more interesting cadets. Stage 7 increased the difficulty significantly. The challenges became longer, harder, and more painful. Cadets began to fall. A Palaxian cadet collapsed during an agility test, her legs simply refusing to move anymore. Medical teams rushed in and carried her away. A Veth cadet cracked during an impact test, his crystal body developing fractures that would take months to heal. A Karath cadet dropped a weight on his own foot and screamed as bones shattered. Torin was struggling. His scales had turned a sickly yellow color, and his movements were becoming slow and clumsy. But he kept going, pushing himself forward through sheer willpower. Do-Yin watched his roommate with respect. The Palaxian was not built for this kind of punishment. His species was designed for speed and grace, not brutal endurance. But Torin was refusing to quit. Stage 8. Stage 9. By Stage 9, only half the cadets remained. The others had been carried away by medical teams or had collapsed in their testing zones. The arena was quieter now, the cheering replaced by tense silence. Yurix was still going. His forearms trembled with exhaustion, but his pride would not let him stop. He lifted weight after weight, his roars becoming more desperate each time. Then, during a particularly heavy lift, something in his body gave out. Do-Yin heard it from across the arena. A wet, tearing sound. Yurix screamed and dropped the weight. He fell to his knees, all four arms hanging limp at his sides. Medical team to Corazon. Someone shouted. Yurix was carried away on a stretcher. His eyes were closed, but his mandibles were still moving, whispering words that no one could hear. Probably curses. Probably promises to do better next time. Stage 9 complete for remaining cadets, the automated voice announced. Proceed to Stage 10. Torin did not make it to Stage 10. During a climbing challenge, his arms gave out and he fell. The safety systems caught him before he hit the ground, but his body was done. He lay in the medical team's arms, his scales completely white, his eyes barely open. "Good effort," Do-yoon said as they carried Torn past him. Torn managed a weak smile. "Show them," he whispered. "Show them what humans can do." Do-yoon nodded. By stage 10, only 20 cadets remained. Do-yoon was one of them. The others looked at him with surprise. The weak little human was still standing. How was that possible? The challenges continued. Stage 10, Stage 11, Stage 12. The tests became more creative and more cruel. Pain tolerance tests that sent electricity through the body. Temperature tests that shifted from burning hot to freezing cold. Oxygen deprivation tests that made lungs burn and head spin. Cadets fell. One by one, they reached their limits and collapsed. The mighty Vethbrenics cracked apart completely during a sustained impact test, his crystal body shattering into pieces that would need to be carefully reassembled. Scylla the Palaxian made it to stage 11 before her heart began to fail. Medical teams rushed in with emergency equipment to keep her alive. By stage 12, only 5 cadets remained. Do-hyun was one of them. The other 4 were staring at him now. They were elite warriors from species known throughout the galaxy for their physical abilities. And standing among them was a small, soft human who should have fallen hours ago. Commandant Terrell leaned forward in his seat. His 6 eyes were all focused on the human testing zone. "Interesting," he said quietly. Instructor Ven was no longer looking at his datapad. He was watching the screens with his mouth hanging open. In the arena, Do-yoon stood alone in his testing zone and waited for stage 13 to begin. He was tired. His muscles ached. His lungs burned. Every part of his body was telling him to stop, to rest, to give up. But he was human, and humans did not give up. The arena had grown completely silent. Every spectator was watching the same thing. Every screen was showing the same image. A small human standing alone in a testing zone, surrounded by equipment designed to break him. Stage 13 was the strength test, the final measurement of raw physical power. For most species, this was the end. Even if they had survived the previous 12 stages, their muscles would be exhausted. Their bodies would be running on nothing but willpower. The weights they faced in stage 13 were calibrated to the maximum theoretical capacity of their species, a limit that almost no individual could actually reach. Do-hyun watched as a massive platform descended from the ceiling above his testing zone. On the platform sat a block of metal so dense that the air around it seemed to bend. It was dark gray, almost black, and perfectly smooth. There were handles on either side designed for human hands. The automated voice spoke. Stage 13. Maximum strength test. Weight calibrated to human theoretical maximum. Lift and hold for 30 seconds. Numbers appeared on the display screen. 2,847 kilograms. In the observation deck, Instructor Ven made a choking sound. That cannot be right. The human maximum lift record is approximately 500 kilograms. This is almost 6 times that amount. A scientist sitting nearby checked her own calculations. The system accounts for many factors. Adrenaline response, muscle fiber density, bone strength under extreme stress. It calculates the absolute maximum that a healthy human could theoretically lift under perfect conditions. But no human has ever lifted anything close to that. Ven protested. The system does not care about records, the scientist said calmly. It cares about potential. And according to our data, human potential is unusual. On the arena floor, the metal block finished descending. It hovered just above the ground, held in place by gravity manipulators. When Do-hyun grabbed the handles and lifted, the manipulators would release, and the full weight would transfer to his body. 2,847 kilograms, nearly 3 tons. The weight of a small vehicle. Do-hyun looked at the block. Then he looked up at the observation deck, where thousands of aliens were watching him. They expected him to fail. They expected him to grab those handles, feel the impossible weight, and collapse like every other cadet. But they did not understand what he was. They did not understand what Earth was. Earth was a death world. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was filled with oxygen, a gas so reactive that it could burn metal. The temperature shifted from deadly heat to deadly cold, depending on where you stood and what time of year it was. The planet was covered in predators that wanted to eat you, parasites that wanted to consume you from the inside, and natural disasters that could destroy entire cities in minutes. And humans had evolved there. They had survived there. They had thrived there. For millions of years, human ancestors had been prey animals. Small and weak, hunted by creatures with claws and fangs and speed. They should have gone extinct 1,000 times over. But instead, they had developed something that no other species on their planet possessed. They had developed the ability to simply refuse to die. When a human was threatened, their body could do impossible things. Mothers had lifted cars off their trapped children. Soldiers had walked for days with wounds that should have killed them. Athletes had pushed their bodies past every reasonable limit, and then pushed further still. It was called hysterical strength. It was a survival mechanism built into human DNA. When a human truly believed that they had to do something, their brain would remove the normal limits that protected their muscles and bones. They would access power that was usually locked away. They would become something more than human. Do-hyun stepped forward and grabbed the handles. He closed his eyes. He thought about Earth. He thought about his family. He thought about the millions of humans back home who would never see the stars. He thought about all the aliens who looked at his species and saw weakness, who saw primitives, who saw failures. He thought about how wrong they all were. And then he lifted. The weight slammed down onto his shoulders. His knees bent. His muscles screamed. Every fiber of his being told him that this was impossible, that his spine would shatter, that his arms would tear from their sockets. He ignored it all. With a roar that echoed through the silent arena, Do-hyun straightened his legs. The impossible weight rose into the air. His arms trembled violently. His face turned red, then purple. Veins stood out on his neck like cables. But he was standing. What? What is happening? Someone in the crowd whispered. The display screen showed a timer. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Do-hyun held the weight. His entire body was shaking now. Blood began to drip from his nose. His vision was going dark at the edges. But he did not drop the block. He did not fall. 20 seconds. 25. In the observation deck, Commandant Terrell had risen from his seat. His 6 eyes were wider than any of his staff had ever seen them. His mandibles hung open in shock. "This is not possible," Instructor Ven said. His voice was barely a whisper. The human body cannot do this. But it was doing it. Right in front of them, a small, soft creature from a species they had dismissed as primitive was holding a weight that would have crushed any other organic being in the galaxy. 30 seconds. Do-hyun dropped the weight. The block hit the ground with a crash that shook the entire arena. He fell to his knees, gasping for air. Blood was running freely from his nose now, and his arms hung limp at his sides. But he was alive. And he had won. Stage 13 complete, the automated voice announced. There was almost a note of surprise in its synthetic tone. Proceed to stage 14. The arena exploded into chaos. Spectators were shouting. Scientists were checking their equipment. Military officers were frantically making calls to their superiors. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Commandant Terrell's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Stop the test." Everyone froze. Stopping the crucible was unheard of. In 3,000 years, it had never happened. "Bring the human to the medical bay," Terrell commanded. "I want full scans. Complete biological analysis. I want to understand exactly what we just saw." Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. Do-hyun was still on his knees, trying to catch his breath. His body was a mess. His muscles had torn themselves apart during the lift. His bones had developed stress fractures. His heart was beating so fast that it was almost just vibrating. But as the medical team reached him, he looked up. And he smiled. "Did I pass?" he asked. The lead medic, a four-armed creature with worried eyes, stared at him. "You nearly killed yourself. Your muscles are destroyed. Your cardiovascular system is in shock. You should be dead. But did I pass?" The medic had no answer for that. They carried Do-hyun to the medical bay on a floating stretcher. As they moved through the arena, every eye followed him. Cadets who had already been eliminated. Instructors who had dismissed him. Officers who had never given humans a second thought. They were all watching the small, broken human who had just done the impossible. In his private observation room, Commandant Terrell stood very still. His mind was racing through the implications of what he had just witnessed. For 18 years, the galaxy had treated humans as a joke. A primitive species from a backwater planet. Weak and soft and barely worth noticing. The Galactic Council had given them the worst assignments. The most dangerous missions. The least prestigious positions. And humans had accepted it all without complaint. They had worked hard. They had been polite. They had smiled and bowed and asked only for the chance to prove themselves. Terrell had assumed they were just grateful to be included. He had assumed they knew their place. But now he was beginning to wonder, what if humans were not grateful? What if they were not accepting their role? What if they were just waiting? Waiting for the right moment to show the galaxy what they could really do. Terrell thought about the other humans he had met over the years. Diplomats and scientists and soldiers. They had all been polite. They had all been humble. They had all seemed so harmless, but every single one of them had come from the same death world as Do-hyun Park. Every single one of them carried the same evolutionary heritage. The same capacity for impossible strength. The same refusal to die. "Get me the threat assessment files on Earth," Terrell said to his aide. "I think we need to take a much closer look at this species." In the medical bay, Do-hyun lay on a scanning table while machines worked to repair his damaged body. The pain was incredible, but he had experienced worse. Humans always did. He closed his eyes and thought about home. He closed his eyes and thought about home. He thought about his sister Jiwoo, who was stronger than him. He thought about his parents, who had worked hard their entire lives. He thought about his friends and his teachers and everyone who had helped him get here. They would be proud of him. He knew that. And this was only the beginning. Humans had reached the stars. Humans had joined the galaxy. And now, finally, the galaxy was starting to understand what that meant. Do-hyun smiled through the pain. The impossible weight had been lifted. In more ways than one. The medical bay was crowded with people who should not have been there. Senior military officers in formal uniforms. Scientists with scanning devices. Government officials with worried expressions. All of them had come to see the human who had done the impossible. Do-hyun lay on the medical table and watched them watching him. His body was wrapped in healing bandages that glowed with soft blue light. His muscles were slowly being repaired by advanced medical technology. The pain was still there, but it was fading. Commandant Terrell pushed through the crowd and stopped at the foot of the table. His 6 eyes studied Do-yoon with an expression that was difficult to read. Fear, perhaps, or respect. Maybe both. The doctors tell me you should not be alive, Terrell said. The stress you put on your body during the strength test was enough to kill most organic beings 3 times over. Do-yoon nodded slightly. It was difficult, he admitted. Difficult. Terrell made a sound that might have been a laugh. You lifted almost 3 tons and you call it difficult? It was the hardest thing I have ever done, Do-yoon said honestly. I am not the strongest of my species. There are humans who could have done it more easily. The room went very quiet. Dr. Yenix, the chief medical officer of the academy, stepped forward. She was a small creature with too many eyes and hands that moved like flowing water. She held a datapad that contained the results of all the scans they had performed on Do-yoon's body. I have studied many species in my career, Yenix said, but I have never seen anything like this. She activated a holographic display that showed Do-yoon's internal structure. Muscles, bones, organs, blood vessels. All of it glowing in different colors. Human muscle density is approximately 4 times what we expected, Yenix began. Their muscle fibers are arranged in a pattern that allows for explosive power generation far beyond their apparent size. And the fibers can tear and repair themselves in real time during extreme exertion. She pointed to the bones. Human bones are reinforced with a complex mineral matrix that makes them incredibly resistant to breaking. And when they do break, they heal back stronger than before. Their entire skeleton is designed to absorb and distribute massive impacts. She pointed to the heart. Their cardiovascular system is a work of art. The human heart can increase its output by 500% during stress situations. It can maintain this elevated state for hours without damage. And their blood carries an unusually high amount of oxygen, which allows their muscles to function far longer than they should. Yenix lowered the datapad and looked at the assembled crowd. But the most remarkable thing is their brain chemistry. When a human believes they are in danger, their brain releases a cocktail of chemicals that removes the normal limits on their physical performance. They call it the fight or flight response. We call it terrifying. Commandant Terrell absorbed this information in silence. Then he turned to Do-yoon. Why did your species evolve this way? Do-yoon thought about the question. He thought about the best way to explain his homeworld to beings who had never experienced anything like it. Earth is a death world, he said finally. I know that term means little to you. The galaxy has seen dangerous planets before, but Earth is different. Earth does not just have dangers. Earth actively tries to kill everything that lives on it. He sat up slightly, ignoring the protests of the medical staff. The gravity is crushing. The atmosphere is filled with oxygen, which burns inside our bodies and ages us quickly. The temperature changes constantly, from burning heat to freezing cold. The planet has earthquakes and volcanoes and storms that can destroy cities. The water is filled with predators. The land is filled with predators. Even the microscopic organisms try to consume us from the inside. He looked around at all the aliens watching him. For millions of years, my ancestors were prey animals. We were small and weak. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. Every creature on our planet was better equipped for survival than we were. We should have gone extinct 100 times over. But you did not, Terrell said. No, we did not. Do-yoon smiled grimly. Because we learned to refuse. When a predator attacked us, we did not just run or fight. We did both. We ran until we could not run anymore, and then we turned and fought until the predator gave up. We call it persistence hunting. We would chase our prey for days without stopping, never giving up until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Days? One of the scientists said in disbelief. You can run for days? Our ancestors could. Modern humans can still run for many hours without stopping. It is in our nature. We do not stop. We do not give up, ever. Do-hyun lay back down. My people have a saying. What does not kill us makes us stronger. We mean it literally. Our bodies adapt to damage. Our minds adapt to trauma. Every time we survive something that should have killed us, we become harder to kill. The room was completely silent. Then Commandant Terrell spoke. I have been in the military for over 200 years. I have fought in wars. I have seen species that were considered dangerous. But I have never heard anything like what you just described. He stepped closer to the table. For 18 years, the galaxy has treated your species as primitives. We gave you the worst assignments. We ignored your achievements. We laughed at your limitations. He paused. We made a mistake. Do-hyun said nothing. The Galactic Council will need to be informed. Threat assessments will need to be revised. Alliances will need to be reconsidered. Terrell's mandibles clicked rapidly. What happens when humans stop being polite? What happens when you stop accepting the scraps we give you? Do-hyun looked at the Commandant for a long moment. Then he spoke. My people do not want war. We do not want conquest. We spent thousands of years fighting each other, and we learned that violence destroys more than it creates. When we reached the stars, we promised ourselves that we would be better, that we would seek friendship instead of dominance. He sat up again, meeting Terrell's eyes directly. But we also learned another lesson from our history. We learned that kindness without strength is weakness. We will be polite. We will be friendly. We will work hard and earn our place. But if anyone threatens our friends or our home, he let the sentence hang in the air. Terrell stared at him. Then, slowly, he nodded. I understand. The next few days were chaos. News of the humans' performance in the Crucible spread across the galaxy. Scientists published papers about human physiology. Military analysts revised their threat assessments. Politicians debated what to do about this new information. Do-hyun ignored all of it. He focused on recovering from his injuries and returning to training. When he finally left the medical bay, his fellow cadets looked at him differently. The ones who had mocked him before now avoided his eyes. The ones who had ignored him now nodded with respect. Even Yurix, whose own impressive performance had been completely overshadowed, approached him with an expression of genuine admiration. I called you weak, the Korath said. I was wrong. Do-hyun smiled. You were not wrong. Compared to your species, I am weak. Your muscles are much larger than mine. Yurix shook his massive head. Muscles are not the only kind of strength. You have something else. Something I do not have. What is that? The Korath thought about it. You do not know how to stop. Even when your body was breaking, you kept going. I have never seen anything like that. Do-hyun considered this. On Earth, he said, we have another saying. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. It means that failure is acceptable. Giving up is not. Torin, who had been released from the medical bay the day before, came rushing over. His scales were a healthy shade of green again, and his eyes were bright with excitement. Do-hyun, did you hear? The Academy is changing its training protocols. They are going to study human endurance methods and apply them to other species. That is good, Do-hyun said. And Commandant Terrell has recommended you for advanced officer training. You are the first human to ever receive that honor. Do-hyun nodded calmly, but inside he felt something warm. Pride, perhaps, or hope. Humans had taken their first steps into the galaxy. They had been small and weak and ignored. But now, finally, the galaxy was starting to see what they could become. Not conquerors, not threats, but partners, allies, friends, who could lift the impossible when it mattered most. 6 months later, Diane graduated at the top of his class. Not because he was the strongest or the fastest, but because he had helped his fellow cadets through their own struggles. He had trained with them, encouraged them, and never once boasted about his own abilities. The galaxy watched, and slowly they began to understand. Humans were not frightening because of their strength. They were not dangerous because of their endurance. They were remarkable because they combined impossible physical abilities with genuine kindness. They were survivors who chose to be friends. And that, in the end, was the most human thing of all. The end.